There are millions of podcasts being done all over the world that take on the personalities of their creator. Some bring in thousands of listeners each week. Some bring in large amounts of revenue, while others entertain millions and help sell products. If you're like many podcasters, you want to reach your maximum potential. But how? How do you make your podcast stand out from all the rest? Join Dr. Barrett Matthews as he talks to experts who are doing it on The Productive Podcaster. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Productive Podcaster. I am Dr. Barrett Matthews, and I want to thank you all for joining me again. Once again, I tell everyone this, make sure that you subscribe and share with everyone The Productive Podcaster. Make sure that they know that they can listen to us on all of their favorite podcast platforms, and they can watch us on YouTube to see this mug, and if they want to do that. So I want to tell everybody, if you're here for the first time, you're wondering, what is The Productive Podcaster? What it is this. It's a podcast for podcasters, for budding podcasters, for aspiring podcasters, for proven podcasters, whatever. Here's why. So many people are in the podcasting game or want to get into the podcasting game, and they have questions. Am I doing this right? Am I doing that right? Am I perfect? Am I structured the right way? And let me tell you something. There is no cookie cutter way to do a podcast. There are so many different podcasts out there, and they do them a lot of different ways. So what I am doing is I'm bringing to you some of those productive podcasters, and they can tell you what they do. You can either glean ideas from it, or you can just get confidence to know that what you're doing is okay. So that's what The Productive Podcast is about. And now what I want to do is I start off every episode with a segment I call Pros and Cons.
Pros and Cons.
Now, you're wondering, what is pros and cons? Well, pros and cons is a segment where I show you some of the things that the pros do, and you can figure out if you want to do it or if you just want to be a con. So here's the thing. The thing I want to talk about today is your body posture when you're doing your podcast. It has a lot to do with how you project, how your lungs are working, how you're breathing. You don't want to be slumped over doing your podcast. You don't want to look like this. You want to be sitting upright. Some people do their podcast standing up. Don't know how to do it, but they do. If you want to do your podcast and sound professional, if you want to look professional, if you want to just feel professional, sit up straight. Do your podcast as if you're having a conversation with someone and you're talking business. You don't talk business with someone like this. You talk business with someone standing up, sitting up straight, because your lungs have to work, your diaphragm has to work, your chest has to work, your head has to work, your neck and your shoulders all have to sit up right, because your podcast is going to be reflected in how you posture yourself. So understand that is pros and cons for today. Now, I have a great guest. You know, I always love my guests. I have a great guest coming up. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with her. But she is someone I just met recently, and I just fell in love right away because I love her energy, and you're going to love it too. I promise you that. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of The Productive Podcaster.
You've heard the rumblings. You even thought about starting your own. But how? Everybody knows podcasting is the fastest and best way to get your message out and grow your business all at once. Although everybody knows this, nobody showed you what to do. Well, Podcast Nation is ready to do all the heavy lifting for you while you just deliver your message and grow. Join the nation and start your podcast today. Text podcast to 929-244-4323 and make them hear your voice.
Do you hear what I hear? That's the sound of your tribe, your audience, your people. That's the sound of your nation. The people who love to hear the sound of your voice as you bring your special message to them in your very own podcast. How do you get it to them? Let us handle that. We're Podcast Nation, and we make sure they hear your voice. Podcast Nation is a full-service podcasting firm that does all of the hard work for you so that you can be the talent and get your message to your people. Just text podcast to 929-244-4323 and talk to one of our staff on how you can get started with your very own Done For You podcast. Or go to podcastnation.com and get started today. That's PODCAST nation.com. Your people are waiting on you. Make them hear your voice. Podcast Nation.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Productive Podcaster. I'm Dr. Barrett Matthews. I told you before we went to break that I have a very special guest. Let me tell you, a little while ago, I was part of a forum, a seminar, if you will, on podcasting. And one of the people who was there with me was a fantastic lady. She had so much energy, and I love what she does. As well as her podcast, she does some other things. I'm going to let her talk about it, but it's none other than Melissa Del Toro Schaffner. She's an American voice actor. Yeah, she's an American voice actor. And as I mentioned, she's a podcaster. She's also an accountability coach. That's near and dear to my heart because I coach people on productivity. So you can't be productive unless you're accountable. Now, in addition to that, she is also a first-time mom after 40, so congratulations on that. She has worn multiple hats, as if I have gone over enough already, including an international best-selling author. Man, I'm amazed at that. I mean, I could go on and on. Electrical engineer, made a coloring book illustration. She's been on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, all of this stuff. I could go on and on, but if I did that, she wouldn't get a chance to talk. So I want to bring to you none other than Melissa Del Toro Schaffner. Melissa, welcome to the Productive Podcaster.
Thank you so much for having me, Barrett. You are such a joy, and your energy is charismatic and infectious, and I love it. I love being here, and I'm so excited.
A virtual hug right now. So.
It's so hard. We're huggers, right? And this time in history has been really, really hard on a lot of us.
Really hard. So. That being said, has that affected you business-wise?
You know, it's interesting because in some aspects it has affected voice actors. You know, some of the commercials for major sports events went away, but we pivot, right? Mm-hmm. As with any industry, we pivot. So a lot of stuff went virtual that now I'm getting opportunities that I would never have had, you know, if it was regular times, because they would be studio opportunities where it could be something in New York or LA. And but now they're taking from global, you know, people with home studios. So that's where I'm coming from, my home recording studios. Yeah. So, you know, it's given me a lot more opportunity to attend a lot of events like the one we met at, that I would never have been able to because I have a 4-year-old and, you know, not a lot of support with childcare. Yeah. So this has been an amazing time and a heartbreaking time and so much more new opportunity, you know. But some things have fallen away, and you know, you just have to keep pivoting.
There you go. We adapt. That's what we do.
We adapt.
Now, that being said, you have a podcast that's called Untold Tales. Yes. First of all, I like the title. I like the title because it has a little mystery and it makes me curious. Yep. So tell us about Untold Tales.
So Untold Tales is actually a short story sci-fi short story podcast. I never know which one to put in first, short story or sci-fi, but it's a sci-fi podcast and it's short stories. And basically it's the writings of a gentleman named Jeff Robinson, who I met at a meetup, a writer's meetup here in Arizona, where I currently live. And so it's sort of a collaboration between the two of us. We met in person and I saw that he had these awesome high quality stories, works on Amazon.com, you know, not getting a lot of love as far as purchases. So we brainstormed because we're always trying to, you know, create and pivot. So we said, why don't we get people a taste of these amazing stories, you know, via podcast? Because you could go by way of audiobooks with a voice actor, which is what I do primarily, audiobooks, or you could perform it on a podcast, and then people have, you know, higher accessibility to it because they don't have to buy anything. They could just go to the channel, check it out. Do they like it? If they like it, they can buy the books. So it's been amazing because it sort of gives me that blue ocean concept, that open, clear waters for me not to have to compete against anyone except the last version of myself. You know?
I get it. I get
So
it.
yeah, so I've been loving the adventure of narrating these stories.
That is so cool. That is, and see, this is what I'm talking about, because for those of you who are listening right now, you have a skill yourself. Everybody has some skill. You can turn that into a podcast. You can figure out a way. Like she said, they brainstormed and you figured something out. So it is, you have, because I hear people talk all the time about, well, I don't know what I would do a podcast on. You have some skill. Everybody has something that you can talk about, that you can utilize. And I love how you did that. Now, how long have you had the podcast going?
So the podcast is in its first season. We're going to be up to episode 22. So it's relatively young. However, it's very exciting because we're already we have listenership in 20 countries around the world.
Oh,
so yeah, to me that's amazing, and we have almost 1,000 downloads, which I'm very proud of, because when you start something, you're not guaranteed anything, but I believe that it's the vision and the commitment and the daily small things you do in productivity. It doesn't have to be sitting down and spending 8 hours on something.
right.
Just every day, just take a little piece off of it. Like they say, how do you eat an elephant? Like one bite at a time.
I love this woman. I love it. You're speaking my language, Melissa.
Yeah.
I say this to people all the time. I love this woman. I need to go to Arizona. But
Yeah, totally. You're more than welcome.
Okay, good. You heard it here. I got it recorded. But so I want to tell you, first of all, like I said, I love your energy, and I love the idea of untold stories. Now, I want to ask you though, were you a sci-fi person?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a Star Wars woman, 100% all the way. I grew up with that. I just, cult classics like Beastmaster and all that. Like I love science stories. I'm an electrical engineer, so I love the cranial nature of what it takes to prepare to write a story like that. You have to be a pretty smart person.
I agree.
To create fiction that's believable, if that makes sense.
Because there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of technical stuff, there's a lot of time, and it's a whole lot of different things that go into it. And if you get one thing wrong, there's someone out there that's going to find out what you did wrong and let you know that it's
exactly.
wrong.
Like, excuse me, but I can't imagine that 500 people would fit in a ship of that size and take off at that speed.
And you're like, I guess I hadn't thought of that.
Right. And ladies and gentlemen, you just heard that she's a voiceover artist. So
I guess that was my nerd voice.
I love that. I was going to ask you to do something anyway. So, now I do have to ask, have you done some things that the audience may know of?
Well, I've published a couple of audiobooks on ACX, but they're lesser known. I have done some work for a local business called Founders Workshop, who does mobile and web apps. So they have a YouTube campaign of some videos that we have done. Let's see. I'm not the voice of a character on Pixar yet, but it's coming.
Yet.
It's coming.
Yet. I'm predicting that in the next couple months. It'll happen.
Yeah.
Now, as far as for people who are or who want to be podcasters, I should say, who have a gift like yours, who have a gift as far as voice acting, or because I've heard like audio books. Some of my favorite audio books. There's a book I read by Robin Sharma called the leader who had no title. And I tell people, don't buy the book, buy the audio, because it's told in like it's a story. It's a fictional type of book, but it sends the point home. But you have these people playing all these different characters and different voices. And for me, it just resonated more because I heard different characters talking to one another, and it just resonated more. And I know you're in that world. And
I am.
Yeah, and I know that is that fun to do?
It's really fun. I forgot to mention that what I've been doing since the crisis globally, and I don't want to date date this time period, but it's such a huge chunk of our lives right now. As I pivoted to most of the work I've been doing has been audiobook editing. So I actually edit for other narrators.
Oh, are you
And
serious?
part of the reason why I pivoted a little bit is because I have a 4-year-old daughter and I have to keep her at home because she's not going to school because of the pandemic. So I needed to have some kind of voiceover work that I didn't need to do in total quiet.
Right.
So when I edit audiobooks, I can sit in the living room, she can play, I can work. So it's actually been a good pivot for me, you know, not having the reliable peace and quiet that I normally had when she was in school. So I've been able to continue working that way, which has been a blessing to me and the narrators I get to work with as well. So that's, you know, one way I've shifted.
So like you said, we all have to. So in putting together your podcast, Untold Tales, what would you say has been the biggest challenge in putting it together?
Well, I would say if anyone listening is thinking of starting your own podcast, one of the most important things in building an audience is being consistent with your promises. So if you say you're going to release an episode a week, or in my case, I release 3 stories on the first of the month. That's what people can expect. So what you want to do is just choose what you feel you're able to do and then just do that. Don't try to be, you know, was it Joe Rogan or, you know,
Right.
because these people have production teams and they farm out their editing work. Podcasting does take a certain amount of editing that you don't expect to have to do. So it's not just talking into you could talk into the microphone and send it out, but if you want something more polished and, you know, with an intro and an outro and all different call to action and different things, you definitely want to schedule a commitment that you can meet every single month. So that's the biggest piece of advice I would give you, is bite off maybe even a little less than you can chew.
I like that. I like that. Now, like I said, you're an artist. This is what you do for a living, as far as talking. And you have, like I said, you have a cool setup there. I love your setup. What would you say to someone just getting started or still relatively new in podcasting as far as their equipment?
Right. So equipment. Okay. The most important part of the whole process is the information. That being said, people will not be very forgiving as far as if the sound quality is bad. So number one, you want to have, this is actually a Rode NT1A, so it's a pretty inexpensive microphone. You don't need a really expensive microphone, but you want to find one that's good for your voice. If my voice, probably your voice, Barrett, sort of they're mid-range, but if you have a really
high voice?
or if you have a really low voice, or, you know, whatever, you might need a different kind of microphone.
Thank you for that, by the way.
You're welcome. And then I also use a DAW, like a little box. I use a Focusrite, but it actually takes the information from the microphone, because I'm a voice actor, so it has to be broadcast quality. It goes through this little box and comes back into the computer, and the little box actually smooths out the science of the waves of all that to make it, you know, convert to your computer better. But you can get a plug-in USB mic and just podcast with one of those. But if you're really serious about your sound quality and about people listening for long periods of time to your voice and your audio, then you're going to want to get the microphone, the DAW, the digital interface, and then you're going to want to have the software that you need to edit. And you can get free software like Audacity, or what I use is Adobe Audition.
Oh, thank you so much. And that's good, because this is something, and I hope if you're listening, you're taking notes, because this is something, like I said, I brought her on. I mean, she does this for a living. This is what she does. So she's giving you some great advice. So I hope you guys are taking notes on that, because it's really good. Now, back to your podcast, Untold Tales. Like you said, it's a relatively young podcast. Well, first of all, did you have any challenges? But how is it as far as building up your audience?
Well, you know, as with any podcast, you start first with your circle. Actually, any endeavor you do, you start with the circle closest to you. So, you know, right now, my mom, is a big listener. My sisters and some close friends. But as the word of mouth gets out, more people expand that don't know you, that become endeared or attracted to you, and then they'll tell their friends. But you have to look at it as a long game, because it's not going to just become a sensation overnight. That's just not, no growth happens that way,
Right.
And if it's growth that happens that way, you can easily lose it too. So
wow, is that true?
yeah. So the Oprah effect could hit, spike, and then drown your business, so you just want to build up your muscles so that you can handle more and more and more and more and more like that.
And so I gotta ask you this. So you said your mom is one of your fans. What does mom say about it?
She loves it, and my husband said it's because it's me. And actually, I ask her, Mom, do you love the podcast just because it's me? I mean, really, is it just because I'm doing it? And she said, I don't think she lied to me, but she told me no, because she bought all of Jeff's books on Amazon. So she walks the walk, she talks the talk.
There you go.
And she listens to the podcasts. Since my father passed away 2 years ago, she likes to lay down, and sometimes her mind sort of gets to a really bad place. So she uses the stories in the podcast to sort of transport her to another place and time. And the best compliment I got from her was actually, that didn't even sound like you. I didn't even know that was you.
That is a great compliment. And I want the audience to understand this, that if you can tell a story, oh my gosh, the world is yours. If you can tell a story, you can do so many things just by telling a story, because that's what people relate to. They get pulled in from the story. Now, and see, here's the difference in having someone like Melissa do this, because I'm trying to get you some more work too. But
you're very sweet. Thank you. Thank you.
But the thing is, having someone like Melissa do, because this is what she does, is she knows how to use her voice as the instrument that it is. Because look, we all like to think we're good at doing everything, but we're not. We're not good at doing everything. You have a professional here who's good at it. So hey, I'm just saying, Melissa Del Toro Schaffner.
It's interesting, because whenever people are interested in voiceover, a lot of people are interested in it. In fact, I run into a lot of people who say, hey, I've always thought about doing that. Do you have any tips? The biggest tip for a voice actor is small V, big A. It's all about the acting. And making someone else's words sound like they've naturally come out of your head and mouth is not easy. I mean, I've spent hundreds of hours coaching to be able to say a 3-word sentence.
Right. And I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. I mean, we've all seen those scenes in shows where an actor is practicing and they're practicing how to just say one line. And so it's true. It has to happen like that. Now, the thing is, guys, you have a podcast, you have a story, you have something. Having a voice actor, I'm telling you, it can make all the difference in the world as to whether people want to pay attention to you or not. So, Untold Tales is the name of her podcast. Just so you know, while we've been on here, I have subscribed to it and give you a 5-star.
Yay!
So you got it.
You will not regret it. I will make you proud. Barrett, I will make you proud.
You already have, girl. You already have. So, Melissa, I want to thank you for being on a productive podcast. I want you to please tell everyone where they can find your podcast.
Absolutely. Well, you can find it on almost every main podcast player in the universe. However, you can go to my website. That is one place that you can listen to the final episode, the last one that was uploaded. That's www.melissadeltoro.com. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes. You put that in the show notes, or okay, good. That's a mouthful. Or you can go.
Catchy. I remembered you from. I remembered your name.
Yeah. Or you can go to iTunes, Google Podcast. Just search Untold Tales, and you'll see sort of a little brown and black with some trees in the background, little thumbnail. That's the one. Just click on it. You'll see my name and Jeff Robinson, and just take a listen. I know you'll love what you hear.
I love it. I love it. Melissa, once again, thanks for being a part of the Productive Podcast. And guys, she's going to stick around for our next segment after the break, which is PodQuest, where we're going to take a question from one of our audience members. So Melissa will be with us. So you guys stay right here. We'll be right back with more of the Productive Podcaster.
You've heard the rumblings. You've even thought of starting your own. But how? Everybody knows podcasting is the fastest and best way to get your message out and grow your business all at once. Although everybody knows this, nobody showed you what to do. Well, Podcast Nation is ready to do all the heavy lifting for you while you just deliver your message and grow. Join the nation and start your podcast today. Text podcast to 929-244-4323 and make them hear your voice.
Do you hear what I hear? That's the sound of your tribe, your audience, your people. That's the sound of your nation. The people who love to hear the sound of your voice as you bring your special message to them in your very own podcast. How do you get it to them? Let us handle that. We're Podcast Nation, and we make sure they hear your voice. Podcast Nation is a full-service podcasting firm that does all the hard work for you so you can be the talent and get your message to your people. Just text podcast to 929-244-4323 and talk to one of our staff on how you can get started with your very own done-for-you podcast. Or just go to podcastnation.com and get started today. That's PODKAST nation.com. Your people are waiting on you. Make them hear your voice. Podcast Nation.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Productive Podcaster. I am Dr. Barrett Matthews. I told you Melissa Del Toro Shafter was great, and she is. And she is still here with us because we're doing our segment now that I like to call PodQuest.
PodQuest.
So what is PodQuest? PodQuest is where Melissa and I will answer a question from one of our audience members. Now, let me pull up the question here. The question for us is, what if I am not one who talks a lot? Melissa, I'll let you take that first.
Well, that's a really good thing to know about yourself if you don't talk a lot. As a voice actor, we need to really protect our voice, but we need to exercise it too, right? So we stay away from the common cold, all of that. If you don't talk a lot, I suppose maybe evaluate whether or not you want a podcast, because that is a commitment, like we had talked about in the last segment. That's a commitment that you're going to make to your audience. I would recommend, to strengthen your voice, a good exercise might be to just start reading something that you like to read, out loud. Maybe start reading out loud to yourself. As an audiobook narrator, I mean, you get wiped out after 2 hours of talking, for an audiobook. So they recommend talking for no more than 1 hour at a time, although, we break that rule all the time.
Yeah.
But I would say read out loud to yourself and strengthen your voice that way. And then just find a topic you like to talk about. Your voice will strengthen on its own.
And I like that. And then the thing is, the question, like I said, I don't know if the question was related to talking a lot as far as strengthening your voice, or is it talking just that you just don't like talking?
I didn't think about not liking talking.
He said if you don't like talking, you may want to consider if you want to do a podcast, but there are ways around that. I mean, it depends on what you like, because you could still do a podcast where you have guests on, and you can have them do a lot of talking. You just moderate.
Yep.
I mean, I have a client of mine. She does a podcast where she has 3 or 4 people on there. They pick a topic and talk about it. That way she has other people talking while she's not doing all the talking. Some people do podcasts where they just highlight music.
Right.
And they play the music where they don't have to do a lot of talking. So there's like I tell you when I start the show, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat. Yeah. If you want to be a podcaster, I recommend it for everyone, because in this day and time, you've got to do something to get yourself out there.
That's true. And I was thinking also, you can also change up the episode length. So maybe you do podcast episodes that are like 10 minutes long. Maybe that's appropriate for you, and then you don't have to speak for a very long period of time. And,
very good point.
You can do something short and sweet.
Very good point. I like that. That's very good. So, Melissa, I want to thank you. That's PodQuest, everybody. I want to thank Melissa for joining us today on the Productive Podcast. And you're probably wondering right now, well, how can I get my question answered? Well, I'm going to tell you how. You have to join our Facebook group. What's the Facebook group, Barrett? Well, the Facebook group is the Productive Podcaster. If you just go to the Productive Podcaster Facebook group, you can have your question put in there, and we can see if we can put it on the show and get it answered for you. So just do that. But like I said, guys, I want to thank Melissa for joining us one more time on the Productive Podcast. And Melissa, you're welcome to come back anytime. Your energy is so infectious.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. No problem. So I want to thank you. And guys, we're going to go to our next segment right now, which is the podcast profile. So we're going to the podcast profile. So what does that mean? That means I am going to pick out a podcast that I found that I like listening to, and I want to share it with you guys. And this podcast is called Heart of the City by Vincent Harris. And he talks about people in his city. You see how simple that is, guys? You don't have to think of something extravagant. He's staying home. He just picked a topic up, which is his city, and he's talking about it. So that is our podcast profile, Heart of the City by Vincent Harris. So guys, check that out. Check out his podcast. You may very well like it. Now it's time for our podcast giveaway. Our podcast giveaway on the Productive Podcaster. What I'm going to give away, and it's funny because we have Melissa here, I'm giving away an audio copy of my best-selling book, Why Didn't You Get It Done? I'm giving away an audio copy of the book, and the person who gets that book today is Nikita, let me get the name right, Anyamele Latney. Nikita Anyamele Latney. She is getting a copy of my book, audio copy, Why Didn't You Get It Done? She is getting a copy of that. And you're probably wondering once again, well, Barrett, how can I get a giveaway? How can I be a part of it? Join the Productive Podcaster Facebook group. It's very simple, very, very simple. You join the Facebook group because that's where I get the winners from. I pick them from the podcast. And you want to engage while you're in there too. Talk to people while you're in the Facebook group. So I want to do that. Now, the last part of our show, I love this part, is where I get to give a quote, my productivity quote. And then I like to call it pod quote, but I give my quote for today. Today's quote is, simplicity boils down to 2 steps. Identify the essential, eliminate the rest. Let me say that one more time for you. Simplicity boils down to 2 steps. Identify the essential, eliminate the rest. And that is from Leo Babauta. Leo Babauta. So he gave that quote today. So I want you guys to take that to heart and make sure that you are more productive in your life. So that wraps up another episode of the Productive Podcast. So once again, guys, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share it with your friends. Tell everyone about us. Join the Facebook group, The Productive Podcaster. Make sure you're there. And also, check us out on all your Facebook platforms as well as YouTube. You can see my ugly mug, and you get to see beautiful people like Melissa Toro, who is my guest. And I want to thank her for being a part of the show today. So everyone, have a great day. And like I always say before I sign off, don't just settle for being awesome. Set your goal to all them all. And take action, everyone. I'll see you soon in the next Productive Podcaster. Thank you for joining us on the Productive Podcaster. Be sure to join us next time for another great show. We welcome your engagement, so make sure you participate by joining the Productive Podcaster Facebook group and chime in. Also, share the Productive Podcaster with some of your friends right now. If you have a podcast and you're looking for guests, or if you would like to be a guest on a podcast, join our podcast exchange at www.podcastworlddirectory.com. We'll see you next time.